Hi, my name is Aaron DeMaster, and I'm the pastor of Centerpoint Church. Thanks for coming to check out an online service today. What you'll get to see is the announcements from that week and getting all the details of what's happening at Centerpoint Church. In addition to that, you'll be tuning in to our second preview service. Our series was Adaptable. Check it out. It should be a really great service. Again, thanks for tuning in.
Good morning. Welcome to Centerpoint Church. I'm Sarah, and we are so excited that you are here with us this morning for our second ever live preview service. So welcome. I've got just a few announcements here for you this morning. So if it's your first time here at Centerpoint, you're probably wondering, what can I expect here this morning? And so we're going to have a 1-hour service. We'll have some worship music and a message. When you came in this morning, you probably came through our foyer and saw some of the great things that we had going on there. We had signage for our Centerpoint Kids program. That's our children's ministry here at Centerpoint, and so that's where kids can get checked in if they're here with you this morning for some great activities during our service. We had our Welcome Center, which has lots of great information and things for you as well. We had coffee, so if you need to fuel up this morning like I needed to, make sure you stop on by and grab a cup. And then we also had some stickers, red, yellow, and green dots, and those just help us determine how to best connect with you during this time of social distancing. So just grab one kind of based on your preference of where you're at with social distancing, and that would be wonderful. So coming up, our Enneagram seminar is happening this Wednesday at the Hub at 6:30 p.m. And you might be wondering, what is an Enneagram? And so it's a personality test, and it really helps us gain some insights not only about ourselves, but how we can best connect and work with other people. And then we have the start of our regular services. How exciting! Coming up on Sunday, September 13th at 9 a.m. And from then on out, every Sunday we'll be right here at the Children's Museum of Fond du Lac at 9 a.m. So make sure you mark your calendar and plan to come check us out throughout this fall. And then after the service today, we have free sweet corn. Awesome, one of my favorite parts of fall. And so we've got free steamed sweet corn. Grab a corn on the cob on your way out the door. Kickstart your lunch. We've got all the fixings, so make sure you don't miss that after our service today. And I think that's everything. Bye.
My name is Aaron DeMaster, and I'm the pastor starting out Centerpoint Church. Thanks for coming to check out one of our preview services. The whole point of a service is to help us figure out the kinks and the issues, like maybe we have too much power coming out of the things we have plugged in. So these are things we're going to be learning. But our goal is to be able to provide a great service and community for all who attend, and this is one step for us getting to that. So thanks for being willing to be people that kind of step into some risks and some of our mistakes. Now, I'm not gonna lie, trying out a new church, especially one that's maybe only had one other preview service, is kind of scary, right? It can be kind of scary and super awkward. And that's coming from a pastor, someone who's supposed to like church, right? So I want to be up front with you so you know exactly what you're getting into. First off, relax. During our 1-hour service, we won't make you say or do anything weird other than maybe wear colored stickers, which you probably got on your way in, and that was optional even still. But we're a laid-back church that has a mission to help you take the next step in your relationship with God. Whether that means simply allowing you to just show up, whether that means helping you start a relationship with Jesus, or that means challenging you in your walk with God day to day. But no matter who you are or where you're at in that walk, you are welcome here. We are a place that all can come and all are loved. Secondly, a thing you can expect from today is we have a goal to create a positive, life-giving experience when you are here. We do that through talking about the life changes that come with following God and creating a positive community here. That involves coffee, tasty treats. That involves corn after the service. FYI, we have sweet corn afterwards. You should grab some on your way out. It's all cooked and tasty and delicious. But finally, we have a goal to make sure that our teaching is relevant and applicable to your everyday life. We take God and the Bible very seriously, but we hope to make it understandable to all people through practical examples, language, and more. Because to be honest, even as a pastor, the Bible can be tough to understand sometimes. So hopefully this gives you at least some ease to your nerves about being here if you were nervous about it. This week, we're continuing a series that we've been calling Adaptable. And adaptable is something that we've all kind of had to deal with lately. Change is a super scary word to many of us. And what we are living in right now, it's always changing, it seems. Things are changing around us all the time. Work, schedules, schools, decisions, futures, the economy, and everyone responds so differently to it. Like, for example, I have a nice Packer scarf right now that sometimes is a mask, sometimes is a scarf. Things are just changing, and people respond so differently. Plus, the kicker of it all, we are in an election year, which just adds to the fun. You hear so many different aspects of things, no matter which side you're on. So today, we're going to see that adaptability is important to God. Last week, we did an online service and we talked about how adapting to our circumstances is important, along with adapting to things that sometimes are just out of our control. And sometimes God purposely even presents us with those circumstances. This week, we're talking about being adaptable to people. But let's be real for a second. Being adaptable to people is so hard. For me, my least favorite people, or hard to be adaptable with, are time wasters, are crabby people, and are people who provide poor service. Specifically this last one. My wife knows it all too well. We go to a restaurant, or we like going to restaurants all the time. And as we're at a restaurant, if when you get seated, and then it takes forever for the host to get to you, and you're waiting, and then you're waiting, and no one's actually taking your order, and you're still waiting. Well, my wife, she just knows that I'm fuming inside. I'm like, why hasn't anybody come to us? I start fuming, and she's an angel, so she's like, Aaron, it's fine. She tries to distract my mind. She tries to calm me down, but she can just see once there's this time that's flipped a switch in my brain, and it's this mental clock of, we need someone to come to our table. I start doing one of these, except not anymore, because that means you have COVID, basically. So I don't do the cough anymore, but I start kind of just looking around. I start slurping our water that we maybe got. And then the bad part about it is you also see the host. They're talking to each other over in the back, and it's just driving me insane. And then, to make matters even worse for myself, is a lot of times we go to dinner with people from church, people from here, and they got to see me like this because I try to be the same person as I am on stage, as I am out in the public, and they're going to see me fuming. They're going to see me upset, and that makes it awkward. And then finally, I'll make the awkward ask. I'll be like, hey, did you guys miss us? And then a lot of times it's always oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. We totally forgot, or it's something totally acceptable. And then I'm just feeling horrible inside for being so angry. But I usually end up adapting to the situation after I'm done fuming. Now, this is my situation and kind of silly, but have you been there before? Frustrated by a situation or a person, mad about something maybe you dislike, irritable about differences, whether it's opinions or values or beliefs or viewpoints. Maybe you're set in your ways and just not excited about what other people's opinions are or what people are doing. So much so that sometimes you avoid it on all costs or avoid them on all costs. I think we've all been there, right? We've all been there, and this is something that was very typical for God followers in the early days. But it was something Jesus countered when he came here on earth. And there's a specific story in the Bible that proves this, and it deals with eating pork. I know, weird, right? Well, the story, it starts in Acts 10. This time is right after Jesus leaves earth, and then he changes the religious world for everyone. In order to understand the story really well, I need to give you some context, and it'll help you enrich the understanding of this story. Back then, there were Jews. And then some people who converted as Christians, because Jesus was a Jew, but Jesus kind of changed the ways and people became followers of him and Christians. So there was Jewish Christians, and then there were people that didn't convert and were Jews. But then there were also people who were known as Gentiles. And Gentiles were neither. Christians and Jews did not mix with Gentiles. Gentiles were these non-followers of God. They were seen as unclean by the foods they ate and the customs they did. They ate nasty foods like pulled pork and lobster. But for real, back then, God wanted his people to be distinct, set apart. So certain foods were off limits, and that happened to be a food that was off limit for God followers. Well, Gentiles, they were lawbreakers, and they did what they wanted. They didn't follow God, and they ate what they wanted. Well, after Jesus' time here on earth, he basically drops this bomb on the Jews and the early Christians, and he says, any person can come to know God and be a part of God's family, even the lawbreakers. Even the lawbreakers can be a part of God's family. So imagine, you're this rule follower, and all of a sudden, you have to start mixing with Gentiles. The people you despise and that are kind of just people you don't want to associate with. Imagine that today. Like, you all know those people you just don't get along with. Well, this obviously is a tough change, as Jesus just drops this on everyone, that you got to start mixing now. Well, as this transition happens, there is this guy named Cornelius, and this is where our story picks up. Cornelius, he was a Roman officer, and he is a Gentile, but he's someone who's open to God, and he's curious about God. So God provides him with this vision to send for a Jewish Christian to then learn about God, teach him about God, and his name is Peter. Some of you have maybe heard of him before. Well, at that same time, Peter, who also was with Jesus, he has this vision that gets a little crazy. This vision gets a little out there. Take a look. It's in Acts 10:9. It says, the next day, as Cornelius' messengers were nearing the town, Peter went up on the flat roof to pray. It was about noon, and he was hungry. But while a meal was being prepared, he fell into a trance. A trance? A trance where he sees reptiles, animals, pigs, all kinds of unclean things in his trance. And then he hears this voice that says, kill and eat. And Peter says, I'm not eating no barbecue ribs. That's impure, that's unclean, that's against what God wants. It actually says in Acts 10:14, it says, no, Lord, Peter declared, I have never eaten anything that our Jewish laws have declared impure and unclean. But the voice spoke again, do not call something unclean if God has made it clean. The same vision was repeated 3 times. Now you gotta be thinking, right? Aaron, a trance, come on now. That's a weird story. Well, first off, it's in the Bible, and I think we actually can relate to it if you understand a trance. For me, when I hear of trance, this is like a side note. When I hear of trance, I instantly think of that 70s show, you know, of how they like transition the scenes, kind of like this, you know, like they're always like doing like weird things. You're like in a weird trance of something like that. Maybe you're thinking of those funky transitions. Maybe I'm just weird. I don't know. But let's get real for a second. I feel like trances actually happen all the time for us. You know those times you get something stuck in your head that you feel you should do or not do, and you don't totally understand it right away? Like you feel that there has to be a better understanding for this, or there has to be a better way for this one thing that you can't stop thinking about. And it's even counter to maybe some of what you've always heard or valued or believed. But everything in you is like, what does this mean, and what do I do with this? Well, Peter has this happen, and then is forced to act upon it. Right after this happens, Cornelius' men, they show up at his house, and they bring Peter to Cornelius. When Peter meets Cornelius, he says this, Acts 10:28, you know it's against our laws for Jewish men to enter a Gentile home like this, or associate with you even. But God has shown me that I should no longer think of anyone as impure or unclean. I came without objection as soon as I was sent for. Now tell me why you sent for me. And Cornelius goes on to say, tell me about Jesus. Tell me about Jesus. And Peter does. And this person accepts Jesus' teachings and gets baptized. He becomes a Christian. Baptism is basically a public statement that just says, I'm following Jesus. But to end this all, Peter realizes that God is for all people. Acts 10:34, it says, I can see very clearly that God shows no favoritism. In every nation, he accepts those who fear him and do what is right. Peter stays with them for a few days, and I'm sure he tries pork while he's there, while he's teaching God's ways to them. Now, this story, it's a bit all over the place, right? It's a little out there. But I think it's a clear example of how important being adaptable to others really is. Being adaptable in our beliefs, in our own concepts. I think there really is, there's some specific things that we can learn from this story to help us learn how to adapt to others better. The first thing that comes to mind right as we're reading through the story is be teachable. You need to be teachable. Peter, he knew what he believed, which is great, but he was willing to be teachable by the vision, by God, and by the others around him. Peter thought it was a certain way, cut and dry, black and white, and God showed him otherwise. As a follower of God, or maybe you're honestly just someone who's trying to figure it out right now, are you teachable? Are you a teachable person? Meaning, are you willing to listen to others? Do you challenge what you've always known? Do you pray about what you're struggling with to gain understanding? Do you hear others around you fully? My wife and I, we shop at IKEA a lot. We'll get the furniture. We like it. It just kind of fits into our house really well. So and it's kind of cheap. So we'll go to IKEA and we'll pick out furniture. And the downfall of IKEA is you have to assemble all of it. So we'll buy this furniture, but a plus for me is my wife likes to assemble it. It's amazing. So I rarely ever have to assemble any IKEA furniture. Well, after we buy it, there's times that I do have to assemble it, and it never goes well for me. I kind of wing it. I don't really use the instructions. I start putting it together, and then I have to repair it multiple times. It's just one time after the other after the other. And it just is I always mess it up. And my wife's like, you have to use the directions. And I'm like, nah, I don't need that. I think of IKEA directions like this, kind of have you seen this meme? And that class is how you successfully put together a dresser from IKEA. It's just words after words after words or picture after picture. Well, I'm personally set in my ways when it comes to assembling IKEA furniture. I'm not teachable when it comes to IKEA furniture, and I don't learn from experience. I think it's important to be willing to hear others out with things in our world today. Be taught by others, and then wrestle with that new teaching to see if it's true and if it fits with your values, especially with God. Check to see if it fits with what the Bible says, what you know about the character of Jesus, and what your heart is telling you inside. Peter, he was teachable to do things differently, and he brought multiple people to know God in doing that. That's amazing. For you, are you teachable right now in how God is moving today? Are you giving people a time to explain themselves and to teach you? And then do you wrestle with it when they give you teaching? The second thing we can pick up from this story is watch for a messenger. Watch for a messenger. Peter, he had this teachable moment. And then literally someone showed up at his door. Have you ever experienced that before? That time where you have this gut feeling, a thought that's just stirring in you, and then you go into a trance, or it's stuck in your brain, and then all of a sudden someone brings it up to you. Or you hear it in a conversation, or you hear it on the radio, or you see a post about it, or wherever. God does this all the time. People who are connected to God, meaning someone who has respect for God, are people who many times are messengers for adaptations that you need to make. For you, are you listening to it? Are you watching for a friend or someone that God could use to bring you a message, and are you wrestling with that? Peter, he put his vision and the messengers together to see that God wanted something to change in him. And then our third thing and our last thing is adapt for others. Adapt for others. Peter went into a Gentile's home, and it doesn't explicitly say this, but I'm guessing he did eat pork. He ate some sort of unclean food, I'm sure. But in his adaptation, it not only changed his thinking, but it allowed him the opportunity to bring others to God. Peter adapted his values, something he had to wrestle with personally to share who God is. And it was a change that changed hundreds at first. But think now, thousands are learning from Peter's example. Millions of people have been brought into God's families that aren't connected to the Jewish laws, that were Gentiles. Peter adapted to God's prompts, and things changed significantly. There is something to adapting for the growth of God's kingdom. Paul is a big writer in the Bible. He's written a lot of the books of the Bible. He's kind of a big shot, and he specifically talks about this. As I'm getting close to wrapping up here, I'm going to read a passage that Paul talks about. It's in 1 Corinthians 9:19 is where it starts. It's a bit longer, but see if there's some things that you can pull out of it. It's in 1 Corinthians 9:19. It says, "Even though I am a free man with no master, I have become a slave to all people to bring many to Christ. When I was with the Jews, I lived like a Jew to bring the Jews to Christ. When I was with those who followed the Jewish law, I too lived under the law. Even though I am not subject to the law, I did this so I could bring them to Christ, those who are under the law. When I am with the Gentiles who do not follow the Jewish law, I too live apart from that law so I can bring them to Christ, but I do not ignore the law of God. I obey the law of Christ. When I'm with those who are weak, I share their weakness, for I want to bring the weak to Christ. Yes, I try to find common ground with everyone, doing everything I can to save some. I do everything to spread the good news and share in its blessing." Did you catch that? Paul, this big shot of the Bible, someone who is a huge deal, calls himself a slave to others. He shares each other's weaknesses, adapts what he does based off of who he is around so that he can bring them closer to God. I was blown away by this. That's insane to me. To call myself a slave to others, I don't do that. To make sure that I bear others' weaknesses, I don't want to do that. I was challenged by this. It hit me so hard this week. It doesn't say Paul's fake. It doesn't say he pretends for them, but he simply adapts to who he is with. Here at Centerpoint, we have an intention and effort to do this as well as we possibly can with people here in Fond du Lac. We want to adapt to people that are around us. Now, we won't compromise our core beliefs, but we want to adapt some of our ways to reach people who aren't normally into church. So we adapt certain things to reach other people. The first thing is, I think this is a pretty laid-back service. It's in a children's museum. Have you ever seen that before? We obviously are trying to reach families, and so we have a space that's geared towards kids. We have coffee. That's pretty laid-back. That's kind of a chill atmosphere. And then our outreach, how we do outreach, we try to do things to reach people who aren't normally into church. So we do non-church things and weird things. These are some of the ideas that we have stirring. We haven't done any of these, but like catchy phrases, like here's one, give us a shot, Centerpoint Church, it's on a shot glass. Like give us a shot, check out our church. Here's another one, check us out, we don't suck, and it's a succulent. Another one, check out church, we don't stink, and it's a candle. Or a mask even that has Centerpoint on it. Again, we're trying to do unique things to reach people who aren't normally into church. So we adapt our language, our events, our outreach approach, and try to reach others. And in doing so, it forces us to really think through what are our values and beliefs. Is there an adaptation that should be necessary? And what's nice is as Christians or as people that are trying to follow God or open to God, we have a model who has done this so well for us. Honestly, if there's one being that has adapted for others more than anyone else, it's God, right? It's God. God didn't ever want to be separate from us or distant from us, but because of our imperfect selves, people who just naturally make mistakes, we caused this division between us and God. But he still wanted to be with us. So he figured out a way to still be with us. He adapted. He didn't change his standard, but what he did was find a way to get us to his standard, which is the Christian story. If you've never heard it, it's God himself dying on the cross, a punishment that is deserved when we do wrong against God. He took it being a perfect being, which made it right for all imperfect people who accept this act. Being a Christian is accepting that God has done that, has made an adaptation of coming to us and sacrificing for us so that we can be with him now and forever in the afterlife. Have you accepted that? It simply starts in your head and your heart saying, God, thanks for adapting for me. Thanks for making a way, and help me learn from you. Help me be adaptable. You can do that at any time. Now, some of us maybe have said that before, and some of us are specifically praying right now, God, help me be more adaptable. Help me be more adaptable. As I'm wrapping up, and after hearing about this, maybe you realize that you need to be more teachable. More teachable meaning listen to others and learn for things on your own, or wrestle with that trance that's in your brain, or find out what's important to you and what's not. As a pastor, my opinions should be insignificant to you. God's are what should be important to you. So my goal is to help point you to God's values and opinions. I want to lead you to discovering that, God's values. But ultimately, you have to decide what God is saying when it comes to those things. It's up to you. So maybe you need to make sure you know what God wants from you. I'd love to have coffee with you and talk about that with you and help point you in the right direction to discover those things and give you spots to study, and then help you connect with God to discover what values are important to you. Maybe after hearing this, you realize there have been multiple messengers knocking on your door lately, commenting, posting, calling you up, or trying to get your attention. Decide if God is trying to use them, and give them some time of day. Buy them a drink, go for a coffee, have them over, listen to their perspective or their viewpoint. Maybe you've realized that you need to adapt for others for the growth of God's kingdom. Maybe that's what you've learned from today. That there are some things that have to change for you, whether it's a perspective or an interpretation. Maybe there's something inside you that you just know needs to change for God's kingdom, to be accepting and less judgmental of others. For you, identify those things this week, and when you want to do what you've always done, remind yourself to go the other direction. And finally, maybe you're hearing that God has been adaptable to you and your mess-ups, and that sounds intriguing to you, and you want his guidance. I'm going to pray in a second here that we follow and are able to align and adapt our lives to what he wants from us. If you've never done that, you can do that right now with me in your head and your heart, and that's the first step to becoming a Christian. If you're not ready for that today, no worries. That's totally fine. I think it's amazing that you're just here checking this out, listening to a message, or just showing up even. Wherever you are at, I want to close us with a prayer and ask God to help us be more adaptable this week. Would you pray with me?
Thanks for tuning into an online service. We hope this message has been meaningful to you. If Centerpoint Church is going to be your church home, I want to encourage you to give a worship offering to Centerpoint Church. If you're just checking us out or just watching a sermon online, please don't feel obligated to give. But if this is a place that you believe in and you want to support the mission of, I encourage you to give at centerpointfdl.com. Go to the Give menu button and you can support what's happening here at Centerpoint. All things given at Centerpoint go to making our services happen and also supporting our community in Fond du Lac. We hope to see you and have you tune in at a different time. Thanks.